Welcome to this short webinar, Choosing Your LPI Essay Topic. So today we are going to be covering a few different topics. We're going to start by looking at the essay levels, and we'll also have a quick look at the essay instructions. And I've got a few sample essay topics that you can look at. We'll discuss the timing for the essay and look at the different question types. From there, we'll move to the main part of this webinar, which is a specific approach called the close approach for writing the LPI essay, and I'll show you how to apply that as well. So as you can see here, there are 6 LPI levels, and the requirement really depends on where you are applying for entry. Different colleges and universities have different requirements. Now, you want to look in this like 3, 4, or 5 range, and usually most institutions are looking in the higher levels there. But it really, it's very difficult for me to say what level you need to get. You really have to check with the institution that you're trying to get into. Now, the first thing you need to do in any test is always read the instructions carefully and make sure you understand what you need to do. Before we focus on choosing your essay topic, let's therefore take a minute to read the LPI essay instructions. I'm not going to read them to you. There's quite a lot of language here, but I'll give you a moment. You can have a look at the instructions, and then I'll point out some of the most important things that you need to think about. So now, as you can see, I've highlighted a lot of phrases which point you to the things you need to do when you're writing the essay. So I'm not going to actually go through all of these things. However, there are 5 key points that I'd like to bring to your attention. First of all, note that you're writing an argumentative essay. So this kind of essay uses evidence and facts to prove a thesis, and it presents 2 sides of an argument. So also be aware of the word length. You're being asked to produce 300 to 400 words. Next, make sure that you have enough paragraphs to deal with your topic. And in this case, you're probably looking at a minimum of 5 paragraphs. And some people might like to write a little more. It's probably not a great idea to write less than that. Also, make sure that you have time to create an outline before you actually write your essay, and I'll show you a little more about that in a minute. And finally, consider how your essay is going to be scored. As you can see at the bottom here, there are 3 areas that the LPI markers are concerned with, and they are language use, content, and organization. So remember that the LPI essay always gives you a choice of 3 topics. So that brings us to our focus for today's session. How are you going to choose which topic to write about when you're doing the LPI test? So imagine that these are the 3 topics that you have to choose from. I wonder, how much time can you spend making your choice? Well, here's one way for you to think about it. Now, the entire LPI test lasts 2 hours and 30 minutes. So we recommend that you leave at least 90 minutes to complete the essay. Now, if you follow the guidelines shown here, you can take about 15 minutes to plan your essay, then 60 minutes to write it, and then leave 15 minutes at the end for editing. So if you go back to this first 15 minutes where you're selecting your topic and brainstorming and planning, It means that really you only have about 5 minutes to choose your topic because you need to have about 10 minutes for brainstorming and planning. So, all of the work that I'm showing you here today is something that you need to practice so that eventually you can go through all of this in about 5 minutes. So, you've already seen examples of 3 questions. Now let's talk about how the questions are worded. So this chart shows you that most LPI essay topics consist of a yes/no question, followed by a very short instructional statement. So for example, provide reasons, or be specific, or provide examples and give reasons. Now, very occasionally, you may see a statement instead of a question for your LPI essay topic. And in that case, you will be asked to agree or disagree with the statement. In each case, no matter if it's a yes/no question or a statement, it's very important that you clearly state your position on the topic at the beginning of your essay, and it's equally important that you provide good support for your position. So when you're choosing your essay topic, keep these must-dos that you see on the right side of the chart, keep them in mind because you need to choose a topic where you can do those things quickly and effectively. So once you've reviewed your 3 choices, you are then going to have to quickly assess your own ability to provide a well-rounded, convincing essay for each topic. And there are several different ways to do this. Some people have their own methods that work for them. But for today, I'm going to introduce you to the close approach. As you can see here, each letter in the word close stands for one step in this approach. So we have comfort, language, opinion, support, and examples. Now, what I'm going to do for the next few minutes is walk you through each stage of the close approach. I'm going to explain what each of these words means, and then I'll show you how to apply this. So let's go step by step. Step 1 in the close approach is comfort. How comfortable are you with the topic? Here you need to look at each topic and ask yourself, how familiar am I with this topic? And what do I know about this? Think about whether or not you've written or spoken about the topic in English, because that will certainly help you. And also, do you know enough about the topic to fill a 350-word essay? And that's an important question. From there, we move to step 2, which is language. Are your language skills good enough to handle this topic? And so here are some key questions. First of all, do you understand all the words and phrases in the topic? Because if you don't understand the topic, it will be hard to address it correctly. And next, do you have enough vocabulary to write about the topic in detail? And finally, can you think of words and phrases related to the topic that you can use effectively in your response? Now, step 3 is opinion. Can you give a clear statement of your opinion on this topic? In this stage, you're going to ask yourself if you can write objectively and persuasively about your opinion. Also, can you acknowledge the opposing opinion in your essay, because that is required? And can you stay on topic throughout the essay? For this part, keep in mind that if you're having a strong emotional reaction to the topic, you might want to steer away from that one because that could influence your ability to remain objective. So the 4th step is support. Can you support your opinion effectively? In order to do this, you will need to think of at least 3 ways to support your opinion. Now, for each of those ways, Are you going to be able to provide enough direct support? And also, is each reason specific to the topic and is it convincing to support your thesis? And finally, can you write knowledgeably about each reason? The final stage in the close approach is all about examples. What examples can you include? Can you think of at least one example for each reason or idea? And is each example that you can think of realistic and specific enough to provide strong support for your thesis? So, those are the 5 stages in the close approach. And now, what I'd like to do is return to our sample topics. So on this chart here, I've got the 3 topics that you already saw down the left side of the chart. And then across the top, you can see the key words for each of the 5 steps in the close approach: comfort, language, opinion, support, and examples. Okay, so the way to do this is look at the first topic and then go through each of the 5 stages and ask yourself a key question for each one. Now, if you can give a really positive answer, you can put 2 check marks in the box. And if you can give a somewhat slightly positive answer, you can put 1 check mark there. But if you really can't answer yes or additional information to answer the question, then you don't put any check marks. Just leave it blank. Okay, so um, ideally, what you should do at this point in the workshop is probably pause this video and then take the time that you need to go through each of the 3 topics and answer the 5 or respond to the 5 stages. I'm just going to read the key question for each stage for you right now. So for comfort, how comfortable are you with the topic? Next, are your language skills good enough to handle this topic? Can you give a clear statement of your opinion on this topic? Can you support your opinion effectively? And what examples can you include? Okay, so now I'm going to assume that you are pausing the video and that you're going to go through this process for each of the topics. So now I'm going to assume that you've come back after doing that work, and we'll go on to see what you do with all these check marks. So presumably you've got a number of check marks for each of these topics, and your final step here is to add up the check marks. And you probably have a different number of check marks for each topic, or perhaps 2 are very similar. In any case, clearly, the topic that has the most check marks is the one that you can write about the most effectively. So once you've gone through and asked yourself these questions, made your check marks, then your final step is to add them up and then make your selection on that based on what you find out from doing that. So if you get the most check marks for this second topic, then as long as you feel after going through that process that you can write about it, that's the one that you should go with. Okay. Okay, so remember, we're going back to the timing issue now. Remember that you really only have about 5 minutes to select your topic because you're going to need to leave time for brainstorming and planning. So as you probably noticed just now, going through this process, 5 minutes really isn't a very long time. And it's very hard to think about those 3 topics and ask yourself those questions and come up with good answers within that very, very short time. So how are you going to manage this during the LPI test? which is a very good question. And so my best answer to you is that you need to practice this a number of times before you go to the official test sitting. So the best way to do this would be to get your hands on some other LPI essay topics and then find a quiet time at home to sit and practice the close method with some new topics. So I do have a few places for where you can find these topics, and I'm going to show you those in a minute because that's how I'm going to wrap this up. Before we do that, here's a quick review of what we've covered today. First of all, you're only going to have 5 minutes to choose your topic in an LPI test sitting. So the first thing you're going to do is notice how each question is worded because that will help you figure out which one you should work with. Next, you're going to use the close approach to review the 3 topics and make a decision. So during that time, you're going to ask yourself, how comfortable are you with the topic? Are your language skills good enough to handle this topic? Next, can you give a clear statement of your opinion on this topic? Can you support your opinion effectively? And finally, what examples can you include? And then the last thing I want to remind you of is that as soon as you have chosen your essay topic, then you need to begin planning your essay. So that's when you will move into the next stage. And we do, by the way, have another webinar to help you with that. I'll show you that in a minute. So I mentioned a minute ago that the best thing you can do now is practice using this method before you go to your LPI test sitting. So in order to practice, you do need to have some other LPI essay topics. And I'm going to show you a few places where you can find additional topics. So first of all, if you go to the very last point on this screen, you see this website, and this will bring you to the free LPI sample essay, and there will be some LPI essay topics there. In addition, you can access our prep materials there or study materials there. And there are 3 different, well, no, not 3. There are a number of different books that you can look at. I want to bring your attention especially to these 2 near the top of the screen. So one of them is LPI Essay Practice. This is a new publication that has, I believe, 8 new essay topics. And another really good one is Guide to the LPI Essay, and there are quite a few essay topics there as well. Also, you can go to the main LPI website where you can get additional information about the test and find out everything you need to know before you do your test sitting. Finally, right up at the top, the very first point here is another webinar that you may like to look at called Planning Your LPI Essay Response. It's similar to this one in that it is a recorded session and it is available at no charge. So you can find out about how to access that on the LPI test website. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I want to thank you for your time, and I want to wish you good luck on your LPI test. Thank you.